Ladies and gentlemen, in today's video I'm going to be talking to you about my newest pinball machine purchase, which is the P3 by Multimorphic. I'm going to tell you why I chose to buy this machine, the process that I went through before purchasing the machine, the delivery of the machine, how the machine showed up, the gameplay of the machine, and my overall impressions of the whole kit. So to the uninitiated, what the P3 is, it's a really very unique pinball machine. It's modular. So a standard pinball machine has a single playfield with a single set of rules. The rules might be updated over time due to code changes, but in general, they're pretty much static. The P3 is different because it's a modular system, and I'll get into this in more depth later, but the back 1/3 of the playfield is a good old school standard wood playfield with mechs. The bottom 2/3 of the playfield is an LCD screen with infrared LEDs across it in a grid pattern, and that basically allows the ball to interact with the infrared LEDs, turning the LCD screen into basically a touch screen. So whenever you play a game, you have the physical modules in the back, and the front 2/3 can change to be whatever the developer wants it to be. So for example, the ball could roll across a digital object on the screen and interact with it, which I think is really very innovative. In addition to that, like I said, it's modular, so the back 1/3 can come out, you can put a new module in there, and that changes the bottom 2/3, that LCD screen, to a different playfield design, different interactions with the ball, so it completely changes the game. So now that we've gone through the base P3 features, I'm going to go through a few upgrades that I've made to mine, just something that you might want to do or consider if you buy your own. So if you're going to be using this machine in a home use environment, I highly suggest you remove the lock and install one of these thumb locks. You're going to have to get inside of the coin door all of the time to access menus. So just like a standard Stern, to be able to access any menus, you have to open up the coin door. One thing that's different with Multimorphic than, for example, Stern, is that there's no buttons here to interact with the menus. You use the flipper buttons, but to enable that feature, you have to open up the coin door. So I find that I'm opening up the coin door more on my P3 than any other machine that I own. It's not a bad thing, but you don't have to fiddle with keys every time. While we've got this open, I'll kind of show you another thing that I added. So it's probably hard to see, but I've got a LED dimmer controller installed in there. I also installed a 12-volt power supply, and I connected all of that to the service outlet of the machine. So to be clear, I have not touched any of the wiring inside of the P3. This is all stuff that I added myself that I connected to the service outlet of the machine. I'll show you where I put the LEDs, but in my opinion, the P3 could use a little bit more LEDs in the very back of the machine. So I'll show you that here in a second. What other upgrades? Okay, so I put on leg protectors. Nothing crazy there. Everybody's seen those. I don't know if you really need them, but I chucked them on, and I've got the always useful cup holder. So I showed you the controller for my custom LEDs that I added to the machine, but I kind of want to explain more of why I added them. So first off, let's talk about where I actually added the LEDs and what I did. So I buy this L-shaped aluminum extrusion, as you can see here, and then I put high density LEDs in it, and I install a little whip like this to connect it to the power supply and the dimming circuit. So I made a longer version of this right here, and I placed it inside the machine so that the light is shining basically backwards. You don't want any light spilling onto the LCD, or else it'll kind of fade it out. So that's where I installed the LEDs. You can't see them whenever you're standing up, which is a benefit that I like. And they're all just held on with double-sided tape. Not my favorite way of installing things, but here was kind of the best method. So why did I install these? Well, some games, in my opinion, it's just a little bit too dark in the back. So for example, Heist. Heist is a game where the playfield module looks awesome, but you can't really see it because it's too dark back there. So I installed the LEDs to help with that. Final Resistance, on the other hand, is a game that I actually think less light is a little bit better. So I don't turn the LEDs on super bright whenever I'm playing Final Resistance. That's why I installed the dimmer module. but it is still useful on final resistance because, as you can see here, there is a very big reflection of the P3 logo up here onto the playfield, and I play all my games with the lights off. I really prefer that. So to help get rid of that reflection onto the playfield, if you turn the lights on and up a little bit, as you can see, it kind of helps remove that glare and you can see more of the playfield. So that's why I installed the custom lighting. Whenever you take out a module and insert it into the P3, there's a little latch system that you have to engage or disengage based on if you're taking it out or putting it in. And that latch leaves a bit of a void over here. And I've actually had a few balls get stuck up here. When I say a few, I mean probably a total of 15 over 2 months of playing it. It's not the end of the world, but you do have to take the glass off to get the ball out. It was a little bit annoying, so I decided to fix it. I designed these 3D printed parts, and these just slide on to the rail there, and it's hard to see. Again, it's black on black, so that's a little bit hard to see, but now the ball can't get stuck back there whenever a ball pops up. So now I'm going to talk to you about the process that I went through before I decided to buy the P3. And first and foremost, price. I really had to think about it because of the price. To be very blunt, the P3 is not a cheap machine, especially whenever you compare it to Stern's Pro or Premium offerings. It's not exactly an apples and apples comparison, but it's something you need to be aware of. Also, I challenge you to do your own research on this, but based on my research, P3s don't really hold their value like a Stern does. So where, for example, my Godzilla or Deadpool, if I buy those and if I sell them later on, I might lose a little bit of money after I bought a new box, but I won't lose a ton of money. The P3 is different. If you buy a P3 based on my research, you won't get your money back if you sell it. You're going to lose a decent chunk of money. And that's something that I really had to think about before I decided to purchase the machine. If you look on Pinside, you can find them used for pretty good prices. So I guess the first question is, why did I decide to buy brand new? So I decided to buy brand new for really two reasons. One, they just came out with an upgrade kit for the P3, which included new flippers, new scoop assemblies, new power supply, I believe. And I just wanted a machine that had all of that installed. I didn't want to have to fiddle with that. So yeah, that's one reason I bought it brand new. Also, because I wanted a machine that had a warranty. I realized quickly on that these are very, very complex machines with lots of moving parts. And anytime you have a complex machine with lots of moving parts, there is a lot of places where you could really have issues. So I wanted to buy a machine that had a warranty, that I knew that if something was wrong, it would be covered under warranty and I could get it fixed. I didn't want to buy a used P3, it work at the guy's house that I buy it from, I bring it home, and then half of it doesn't work for some reason, and I'm spending hundreds of dollars on parts. So yeah, that was one reason I decided to buy a brand new P3. Another reason I decided to buy a P3, again, was the modularity of the system. I'm allowed 4 pinball machines in my house. I decided to cheat the system and buy a P3 so I can buy multiple modules and still really call it just a single pinball machine. So that's why I decided to go with the P3. Before I bought it though, and before I pulled the trigger, I actually contacted Multimorphic, and I have to say the experience was fantastic. I talked to Jerry and Jerry's wife via email. I asked a ton of questions. They were very responsive, very nice to talk to via email. Can't speak highly enough about those two and their interactions with me online. Next thing I did is that I'm lucky enough to have a local bar that has a Weird Owl on site. So Weird Owl is another module that goes in the P3. And I went there and I probably chucked $20 to $30 in that machine one night, and I played the heck out of it. And I played it just so I knew how the flipper assembly felt, because I heard that it's different than standard machines. On a standard pinball machine, your flippers and slingshots are mounted and mechs are installed underneath the playfield. Obviously, you can't do that if you've got an LCD below the flippers and slingshots. So Multimorphic came up with a very clever solution. They mounted everything floating on top of the playfield. This allows you to install all of these devices over the playfield, not touching the playfield, and also it keeps them above the place where the infrared LEDs are that interact with the ball on the playfield. they're able to do this by installing aluminum extrusion rails on either side, and they mounted all of the flipper assembly and slingshot assembly on these acrylic pieces. I don't know if you can see the edges. For example, there's an edge up here, there's an edge there. This whole assembly comes in and out of the machine. It's actually very, very clever. I wanted to point this out because this impacts gameplay. So first off, the solenoids that control the slingshots and the flippers are located down here, basically underneath the apron. It changes the way that the flippers and the slingshots feel compared to a standard Stern or even a Bally Williams. The flippers and the slingshot just don't have the same kick that you would expect on modern pinball machines. That being said, I don't feel that the flippers or slingshots feel bad. It's just very different than what you're accustomed to on other games. After a few games, I got used to it, and to be really honest, I prefer it for really flowy games because I feel like I have better control of the ball because it's not so frantic. It's a little bit slower than a standard Stern. There are also some other differences between this floating design and your standard design, which has the modules underneath the playfield. Since this is all a single module, it's all connected together and it's floating, there's very little connecting this assembly to the pinball machine itself. So whenever you activate a flipper or a slingshot fires, the whole assembly has a good shake to it. I don't know how else to put it. There's a good vibration that flows through it. And that interacts with the ball. So for example, if you ever watch, for example, Buffalo Pinball, he plays his P3 all the time. If you're really looking for gameplay videos, I highly suggest looking at his channel. I watched all of his videos like 10 times before I decided to buy this thing. But as he's playing, you might notice that randomly, it seems like the ball just magically flies from one flipper to the other without the flipper ever touching it. And that's what they call a P3 pass. And that is a byproduct of the extra vibration that this whole assembly implies on the ball. So for example, if you're ever watching a stream and the ball is rolling down the in lane and it kind of gets above the flipper, it's not touching the flipper, and then all of a sudden it flies to the other side, if you notice, he is flipping the flipper before the ball hits it, and the vibration is shooting the ball to the other flipper. That's called a P3 pass. I actually find it pretty fun. I think that's a unique byproduct of this assembly. In addition to that, you can use the same principle to kill momentum on the pinball as it's coming down to the flipper. So for example, the pinball is coming down your in lane, you hit the flipper early at a certain time, the ball shoots up and hits the bottom of the slingshot, kills momentum, and then you can drop, or then you can just catch it. Again, neat feature once you get used to it, and it adds some unique gameplay to a P3 compared to a standard pinball machine. That being said, you can still do a lot of the same tricks on the P3 that you can a Stern. You can drop catch, you can live catch, you can post pass. I don't know how to post pass on the P3. I can do it on my Deadpool, but I've yet to master it on the P3, but I've seen other people do it, so I know it's possible. A bit of a downside to that, not a bit, this is a downside to it. I've noticed that if I'm playing a multi-ball, and if I have a ball crated on my left flipper, for example, and I'm shooting a ball on my right flipper, that ball sometimes just shoots out because of that vibration. So it's something to be aware of, that there's a lot of just unique ball interactions with this assembly compared to a standard Stern. Again, it's not bad, it's just different and something you need to be aware of. So yeah, that's kind of the process that I went through before I decided to pull the trigger on this. And like I said, Multimorphic team, Jerry and his wife, thank you very much for being so kind via email and answering all my questions. The next step was delivery. So I couldn't go pick this up. I believe they're located in Texas. I'm in Missouri. That ain't gonna work. So they had a freight company deliver it. And I have a unique situation. So my house is off of a gravel road up a hill. Super unique. I cannot speak highly enough about the delivery service that Multimorphic uses standard. The delivery guy, super helpful. He didn't have to do this, but he actually helped me get this machine in my truck and up to my house because, side note, this thing is heavy as heck. This is a lot heavier than my Sterns, and I wouldn't have been able to do this by myself. So their delivery crew, super nice, very helpful people. I can't speak highly enough about them. So yeah, that's the process of me deciding to buy it and the delivery. Unfortunately, I did run into some issues with the P3 machine once I got it, and I kind of want to go over those now. So before we dive into this portion of the video, I really think it's best if you had some background about me. So I've been in pinball now for about a year and a half. I've owned machines for about a year and a half. And in that time, my first machine was a new in-box Stern Godzilla. I knew nothing about pinball at the time. I then bought a Judge Dredd that needed some work, so I shopped that out, rebuilt the flippers, redid some of the soldering, and tore down the playfield, put it all back together. I'm a very mechanically inclined person. I like that kind of stuff. My next pinball machine was my Deadpool Pro. Again, showed up, both Stern Machine Pros showed up with no issues whatsoever. I got lucky on both of them. My fourth machine was my World Cup Soccer. That thing needed a lot of work. I, again, shopped out the whole thing, rebuilt all the flippers, redid a whole bunch of the soldering, pulled the batteries off the board, all of that good stuff. So I'm very mechanically and electrically a capable person. I then sold my Judge Dredd to buy this P3. So another thing that you should know about me before we get into this section, I have been blessed to have a baby girl, and this machine showed up when my daughter was 3 months old. So another reason that I didn't buy a used machine is that I wanted a machine that came to me more or less working, so I didn't have to fiddle with it. You don't get a lot of free time whenever you have a 3-month-old daughter, so whenever I do have free time, I want to spend it doing something that I like, not tinkering with something brand new. So that's kind of the mindset I was in whenever I got this delivered. I just wanted it to work. I don't mind tinkering a little to get it working exactly how I want it to, but it should at least off the bat work. The pinball machine was delivered in immaculate condition. There was no issues with this machine from a cosmetic standpoint. Everything was fine, no dents, dings, scratches, or anything like that. So first thing, whenever I booted this machine up, the LCD didn't work. So that was a little bit alarming. I opened it up, I looked at it, and it was just a loose cable. Some of the DVI connectors were stripped, not a huge deal. I plugged it back in and it worked fine. The next item that I ran into is that, as I discussed before, there's a unique flipper assembly associated with this machine, and the solenoids are located in the apron, and all of that movement is up to the flippers and the slingshots using linkages. So the next issue that I ran into is that the ball, as it was coming down the out lanes and even the in lanes to the flippers, would get stuck between the linkages and the playfield. So I couldn't play a game. Like, the ball would just constantly get stuck. It was impossible for it to play. Whenever I could get it to play a little bit, the slingshots were firing the ball hitting the glass probably 2 out of 3 times. It was very frustrating. And then lastly with this portion, all of the IR sensors were triggering at random times. I put the machine into IR test mode to kind of test it, and it was all over the place. To be brutally honest, I was freaking out. I was like, I just bought a brand new machine from Multimorphic. I heard they had good customer service, and I was really hoping that that wasn't a lie because I needed it. That being said, there's a whole bunch of really great resources on Multimorphic's website on how to troubleshoot things. But again, this is a brand new machine. I didn't feel like I should have to troubleshoot everything. So I went into the website and I tried to make some changes to the flippers myself based on these troubleshooting guides, and it was a little bit better, but it still really wasn't good. I contacted Jerry, and I was, as I said, kind of freaking out, and I politely, asked, what's going on? Like, I got a brand new machine, why isn't it working? Jerry, by the way, the owner of the company, walked me through how to fix this, and it actually was an easy fix. So what happens is, whenever they test the machines, they have a piece of plexiglass that goes on top of the LCD screen. Might not mention that. There is a piece of plexiglass on top of the LCD. And they have a specific piece that they use whenever they test the machines before they send them out. And then they put the final piece in there before they ship it, just so you get a clean piece of plexi. Well, the plexi that they put in the machine was slightly curved, so it was convex in the middle. And since it was a little bit convex in the middle, it was causing all of these issues that we just talked about. So Jerry was like, hey man, I got your back. Just take the plexiglass out, flip it around, and everything should work fine. And Jerry was right. It fixed the issue. Unfortunately, those weren't my only issues. The next thing that I ran into was actually on this play field. Whenever you shoot the ball up here, you just get air balls constantly. You have constant air balls. So I read on their website how to fix this. You actually have to shim the modules to get them to lie level with the scoops. So it's a little bit of an in-depth process. You've got to take the modules out. You've got to put washers underneath some stiffeners and tighten everything down. It's really trial and error. So I had to take the module out a couple times, but I eventually got it all smoothed out. And Nick Baldridge, their Multimorphic support guy, kind of helped me out with that as well. Very nice guy. So yeah, I had to fix that. The targets on Heist, and I don't have the Heist module in here, but my stand-up targets on Heist were, I guess, slightly bent back or something. But whenever I would hit them, the ball would just fly up into the glass, the playfield glass. Not the end of the world. I just bent them all back down based on Multimorphic's suggestion, and it all works better now. Next issue I ran into is that the left flipper would stop working as I played long games, and it's kind of something you don't really run into for a while because you really have to play it a while for it to happen to me. So that was a nice troubleshooting debacle. I traced out the wiring all the way back to the button box. I started looking at everything. I contacted Multimorphic support again, and they pointed me to another maintenance item, maintenance how-to guide on how to do adjustments to the flippers to get it to fix that issue. And after I performed those maintenance items once or twice, I got everything aligned the right way, and I haven't had that issue again. The next issue I ran into was the final resistance module not being recognized by the P3. So whenever you take a module out and plug a new one in, there's about 3 or 4 different plugs you have to plug in based on the module, and one of them is a USB plug. So for some reason, and whenever you first get this machine, you don't know what any of those plugs do, So whenever I would boot up the machine, about half the time it would not recognize the final resistance module. So that was an issue to troubleshoot. Again, Nick Baldridge from Multimorphic, he was great. He figured out that it was a bad connector, so he sent the connector right over, so that was fixed. The next issue I had was on my Heist playfield. Again, it's not in here. The right diverter arm stopped working. So it turned out it was a busted servo. That took a while to diagnose. So whenever we figured that out, I had to get the servo and install that. It's not hard, but it was really a little bit more time consuming than I would have liked to replace that servo. So that's another issue we ran into. Another thing to be aware of with all of these P3 modules is that the way that the P3 gets the ball into the playfield is shooting the ball up through VUCs. So vertical up kickers, shoots the ball up through those VUCs. And those VUCs have to be really well aligned with the playfield. And if they're not, the ball just won't come out. It makes a whole bunch of rattling and clanking noises and nothing comes out. So whenever you get the playfields, you have to make sure that these steel tubes underneath the playfields are properly aligned with the VUC locations. Multimorphic has a good guide on how to do that. I cannot tell you how many times I had to take these modules out and make adjustments to those VUCs to get it to not clank and clunk all the time. That was frustrating for me. I'm going to be really honest. The Heist module came in this machine standard, and the Heist module actually was aligned better than Final Resistance, but I still had to change the VUC locations on Heist a couple times. I'm not exaggerating when I tell you that I had to take each module out at least 10 times to get the VUC adjustments correct. Like it was a quarter turn here, a quarter turn there, a tap with a rubber mallet there. It was a little frustrating. Trying to think, what else do we have? Yeah, here's another one. So there's an assembly underneath the playfield that stages the VUCs to get the balls up to the playfield, and there's I refer to it as the main VUC that shoots the ball up into the other VUCs. It's a unique system. Look at P3's website and they'll show you more about it. But mine stopped working. Don't know why. It just stopped working. And if that main VUC stops working, you can't play the game because none of the balls are staged and none of the balls will come out. So I had to take the machine into service position, take everything out, clean all the sensors, clean all the balls, spray air on all of the sensors, and it started working again. So it wasn't a huge issue, but again, a little bit frustrating. We already talked about the DVI cable to the LCD was stripped, so that was wasn't a big deal. Got that fixed. A QC thing that I found a little frustrating as well. I got final resistance, I was playing it, and then I noticed that one of these metal metal lane guides was kind of bouncing a lot, and I noticed that it was missing a screw. Again, not the end of the world, but it's missing a screw. You'd think someone would see that. So I found a screw and put it in there. The heist module, for some reason, there's a crane, by the way. The heist module is cool. It has the coolest mech. It's got a giant crane that comes around and interacts with the ball. And I'm still running into this issue, and I'm still working on troubleshooting it. For some reason, my crane drops the ball at random times. I have some information from Multimorphic on how to fix that, and I need to go through that now. And this isn't, in my opinion, not nitpicky, but the speaker grills. I mean, these are just little, not acrylic, but just little rings that are glued onto the back box. Mine are peeling off. So I actually had to put a little hot glue on there. Not the end of the world, but whenever you pay this much for a machine, you don't think you need to fix it with hot glue. I knew that this machine would require more maintenance than my Sterns. Again, you have a lot more modules here. You have a lot more mechs. You have a lot more mechs in this one. You have a lot more moving parts. That's going to require more service, more troubleshooting every once in a while. I get that. But whenever you compile the list of things that happened to me together, and the fact that I have a now 5-month-old, she was 3-month-old at the time, getting through all of this was extremely frustrating. And I want to really say this again, Multimorphic support team did a great job of supporting me throughout this, but it was still frustrating for me to have to go through all of this. Multimorphic, if you do watch this, thank you for the support first and foremost, but if I could give some suggestions, if someone buys a P3 machine and 2 or 3 or 1 or more modules, if you could, just take the modules and put them in the machine and get all of the VUCs and everything aligned before you ship them. Get the playfields aligned, get the VUCs aligned, because those modules are going to be used in that P3, and it'd be really nice to the customer if you could do all of those fine-tuned adjustments before we get the game. Now, I know that they do that for the module installed inside of the P3, but based on my experience with putting final resistance in my machine for the first time, they definitely didn't do that with this module in this machine. So yeah, it's overall, it's all fixable. I fixed it all. Any part that was broken, they've sent me parts for free. Didn't have to pay shipping. And like I know I sound like a broken record, their support team's been fantastic. But those are the issues that I ran into with this machine that I really wanted to bring up so that the person knows. Another item, and this isn't a maintenance issue, but something to keep in mind here. Multimorphics and others, their material shows that it's really easy to change out the modules of this machine. I'm not a tall man, I'm 5'6". I wouldn't consider myself like weak by any means, but I'm not jacked and tan. Well, I am tan, but I'm not jacked. It's kind of difficult to get this playfield into service position one where you pull it up so you can change out a module. I mean, it's not super heavy, but lifting it up high enough whenever you're a short person, it really takes some effort. And then also the modules, based on what module you have, some of them are pretty dang heavy. So for example, Heist is the heaviest module I have. I cannot get the modules in and out of this machine without a step stool. So be aware, if you're about to buy this, the playfield, getting it into service position one to change out the modules, it's pretty heavy. Be aware of what you're getting into. And also, if you're shorter like I am, get a step stool for changing out the modules, because they're heavy and you really have to get in the machine to pull them out. So, 2 things to be aware of. Alright, this video is getting long, so let me give you my conclusion. Overall,
I like the P3. It's awesome. It's really unique. It's got so many innovations that other games don't. All of the shots in both of the modules that I have, they feel smooth. They shoot great. The code's not as deep as new Sterns, but that's not a bad thing. I still get the one more game feel in all of them. I can change the difficulty of the game by including the center posts and changing the out lanes, which is nice. I like longer playing games. I like it. It's a lot of fun. I do wish that the journey to getting to the point to where I could say that wasn't quite so painful. But as I've stated multiple times, Multimorphic support team was phenomenal, and they really helped me get this machine dialed in. I just wish it wouldn't have taken so long to get there. So, yeah, it's great. If you're thinking about getting a P3, there's a lot of really good videos out there showing you the features of the P3, how to maintenance the P3. I'm not going to get into that, and also gameplay of the P3. That's important to look at. I'm not going to get into those things. There's a lot of good videos out there that I'm not going to be able to beat their quality. I just wanted to give you the perspective of someone who just recently purchased the P3 and their overall impressions of the machine and the process that they went through to get it. I feel like that's useful to consumers out there. So thank you very much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.